Welcome to ideamix Performance and Wellness, where world-leading coaches and scientists explain how their research can help you achieve your personal and professional goals faster.
Hi, it's Jayanti, co-founder and CEO of ideamix Coaching. Coaching's played an important role in my life. It's helped me through my journey to become a powerful leader, mother, and wife. ideamix coaches help you increase your self-awareness, improve your problem-solving skills, and evolve your habits to achieve your goals. All things I'm grateful to have learned and done through my own coaching journey. Our easy 1-minute assessment matches you with an ideamix coach that best fits your needs and values. Each ideamix coach is vetted and experienced and helps clients map and achieve their wellness, professional, and business goals. If you or someone you know could benefit from coaching, visit our website at www.theideamix.com. We also know that not everyone can invest in coaching right now, and that's why we provide free coaching in our Coach Shorts episodes. If you think someone you know would benefit from it, please share our podcast with them. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
Welcome to our first episode in our Coaching, Performance, and Wellness series in 2024. In these episodes, Jamie and I will tackle various topics in coaching, performance, and wellness to break them down. To kick us off, we're going to talk today about the connection between those three topics. We throw those words around a lot, and the connections sometimes aren't always self-evident. To kick us off, we're going to go through 5 rapid-fire questions, yes or no answers only allowed. So, number 1, is coaching only remedial?
No.
Okay. Is coaching the same as therapy?
No.
Is life coaching the only type of coaching?
No.
Can I get coaching that will help me in my career?
Absolutely.
And is coaching just for sports and fitness?
And no.
Excellent.
Great. So let's start by talking about, as you were saying, this connection between performance and wellness and coaching. And let's talk about what are those ties? How is coaching connected to performance and wellness generally, big picture?
So I think the three are so closely intertwined in my mind, and maybe the best analogy that comes to my mind to explain this is when any of us thinks about our health and goes to a doctor, we don't just go to a doctor when we have a problem. We do that too. But we also go to a doctor to get a health check, to talk through where we are, what problems we might be experiencing. And the doctor acts as a thought partner to us in helping us both analyze and understand our own goals for ourselves and then creating a roadmap to get there.
Mm-hmm. So in the medical world, we think of that as preventative medicine. But in the coaching world, how do we think about that? Because it's not necessarily preventative, right? We're not preventing problems, but we are using a coach to do what in that sense?
I think we're using a coach as a thought partner to enhance our performance and wellness, right? So whether that's our performance in our professional lives, in our personal lives, in our familial relationships, and that ties directly to our mental and physical wellness in terms of our self-esteem, our self-confidence, the closeness and intimacy we feel, and the relationships that are important to us in our lives. And so in a sense, it's really like a flywheel, right? Because if you're performing and you feel well and you're able to get the thought partnership of a coach to do those two things, then you're really achieving your best self, right? Because you're achieving your goals. You're doing it with an advisor as a coach who's on side, who you can really use to get objective advice and to actually clearly roadmap your pathway to get to the goals you're trying to achieve.
And before we dive into the process, actually, why should I work with a coach, for example, or why should someone work with a coach as opposed to talking to a friend?
That's a great question. I would put it, I think the best way I have of putting it is, whether it's your friend, your brother, sister, parent, spouse, everybody in your life that you know and have a relationship with is a self-interested party. A coach that you develop a relationship with is really an objective outsider. Their job, in a sense, is to be your thought partner and provide that objective advice. And because there's no other relationship that pre-exists, they're able to do that. I think it's hard for friends to do that. I've definitely found it's really hard both for me to do it as a partner to my husband. It's equally hard, I think, for my husband to do it as a partner to me, because in the back of your mind are always the considerations around the nature of your relationship with that person.
Yeah. And the future of that relationship
Yes.
as well. Actually, this reminds me of a personal story that I have where I had a friend who came to me seeking advice around a problem that she was having. And ultimately, while I pride myself on being direct and honest, because I'm thinking long term about, well, what happens if there's one outcome up to this problem versus another outcome. If I advise and speak about it in one way down the road, it could impact our friendship.
Yes.
And so to your point about, having advice from friends, as friends, we want to be as open, as honest as possible, but we always have an interest as well, right? In whatever we're advising. On the contrary, I will say that, one of the things that I've always heard our coaches at ideamix talk about is this fact that they are a servant leader. So they are really there and to have the best outcome for you, right? Without that level of self-interest. And that's what being a servant leader actually is.
Yeah, that term is so interesting because it's entered a lot of organizational behavior and performance and management and leadership discussions. And I think we understand what it means in that context. But I think it's so applicable to coaching because the coach really is acting as a servant leader for each client as an individual or a team if they're working with a group of people to help both achieve the goals of that individual or team, but equally to really serve their interests very directly, right? I think that's where the individualization of coaching is very different from any other learning or development methodology that you could access.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. Shall we dive into sort of coaching and the different steps that somebody would go through if they work with a coach?
Yeah, because I think so many people have a question on what coaching actually is. Like, what does it constitute? What does it mean in terms of the process that you go through in working with a coach? Yeah.
So, we'll start with the first step that you and I have been talking about, which is really this evaluative step. And really that step looks at three things. Do you want to talk about the three things that we contemplate in that step?
Actually, so I'm going to address two and then you should address the third. But I think, first, where are you today, right? And second, where are you trying to get to? And third?
And then the third is looking at all the forces that influence your thinking around what you think you want and where you think you're going.
Yeah.
So that's your internal dialogue or inner critic, which is often said, as well as the external forces, the messaging that you get from your social circles, your family, your friends, that tells you these are the things I should have and want in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to go back to the doctor analogy here because it's I think a really good illustration. When we go to the doctor asks you a series of questions about exactly where you are today, right? How are you feeling? What would you want to improve? What problems are you having? And when you articulate those goals and how you're feeling today, they also then ask you where you're trying to get to, right? And then they begin asking you a series of questions about the circumstances of your life. What are the external forces that surround you? Do you have time to get enough sleep? Do you get enough exercise? Do you eat healthy enough of a diet? So there's so many elements where they're acting as a thought partner to you in much the same way that a coach does, I think, for an individual.
Yeah. And particularly at that first stage where people were trying to think through sort of that sort of introspection period of who am I, what do I want, where am I going?
Yeah.
And then we move to the second phase. Once you sort of have done that identification process, then we move into sort of this clarification phase, where the coach really weighs in and helps somebody identify what their goals really are. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, a recent example comes to mind. Some months ago, I tore my ACL and I went to the doctor, and the discussion we had was really caused me to be very introspective, because obviously I wanted my ACL to heal and my knee to be better, but the doctor asked me a series of questions which oriented around what were my goals in terms of the activity level I wanted to have. Was I going to be fine not skiing again? Did I want to get on the tennis court again and play competitively? And those goals were incredibly important, because the treatment plan that we then put together in terms of the physio, whether I required surgery or not, and so on, was all dictated by those goals that I had articulated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And so very much in that way, a coach comes in and will help you figure out help you figure out what steps and what questions to ask so that you can analyze where you want to go. And which leads us then to the third step, which is the roadmap step.
So I think the roadmap is probably the single most important thing. There's been so much research and literature on this around goal setting and then goal achievement, right? And lots of people are great at setting goals. What they're less good at, especially when they're big goals, like I want to become the CEO of my company, or I want to start a new business. Those are big goals. And it's really a necessity to take those big goals and break them down into a series of smaller goals, which then results in a roadmap, right? Like, what are you going to do first, second, third, etc. Mm-hmm. And that process, I think a coach is particularly and uniquely trained to take someone through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And really, I think it's dissecting big goals into smaller incremental steps to then create the behavior change. And it reminds me of a story of a friend of mine who worked for a big corporation. They had a huge workshop. First, it was a hybrid setup where they had a workshop, and then they had one individual or maybe two individual sessions with a coach. And my friend working in this big organization said...
And what was the workshop topic?
That I don't remember.
But it was around... It was empowered communication or something along those lines, right?
Yes, yeah. And so my friend, when she met with the coach, said that, people who speak first and speak the loudest are the ones that are heard, and I can't do that. So my voice is not heard in these meetings. So how do I make sure that I'm seen and I'm heard? And the coach then proceeds to delve into, well, why is it that you don't speak out at meetings? And her thinking around this was, well, because I think it's rude to speak up and talk when other people are talking. But again, those are the people who are getting heard. And so the coach gave her a very practical exercise. She said, okay, this week I want you to interrupt as many people as possible, so that you make sure that your voice is heard in these meetings. And she did that. And it was, I think for her, it was actually a very empowering and freeing exercise to go through, to have somebody tell her, it's okay to do something that in your mind and the way that you frame it feels rude, but it is okay. In this environment, in this situation, it is okay if your goal is to be seen and heard in your organization.
It's a total rewiring and kind of reframing, right, that the coach really helped your friend do around her mindset on how to participate in these meetings with the group. Because if you come at it from that perspective, you've really got to shift your thinking, and lots of people can shift their thinking, but do they shift their behavior? And this was such a practical tool for her to actually begin to develop the muscle memory around how to change.
Yes. And oftentimes, even when we know that doing something different will get us what we want, also we need that permission. And that's what a coach oftentimes does, is gives us that permission to say, it's okay to do this, to behave in this way that feels completely unnatural to you. Totally. And I think it really helped her in her group to feel like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah. I think, so we see this in so much of the work that we do, where ideamix coaches work with both individuals and teams, in companies, with individuals on their own. There's this question often when you get to the end of whatever time of working with a coach, of what comes next, right? And I think that takes us straight into step 4, which is this idea of, okay, so you make a change, like your friend goes through the exercise of teaching herself how to interrupt more and get comfortable with that. But how do you now turn that behavior into a natural state for yourself and really begin to do it preternaturally? So you don't have to think about it, but you just do it. And that's an interesting piece of the coaching endeavor.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very interesting to think about the fact that, for example, and we'll go back to the case of my friend, that you have to practice something like speaking up in meetings and interrupting people, right? That's what's interesting, I think, about the practice of behavior change, is doing it, being uncomfortable, but feeling like it's okay to do it because somebody has told you that it is okay to behave in this way. And then you do it. I mean, just like with anything in life, whether it's like you're practicing a sport or, learning music or whatever it is, you do it enough and it becomes natural for you.
Yeah.
Which brings us to our last step. And I think that the important thing about the step is not just thinking about it in terms of, well, okay, I did this one, I had this goal. It was broken down in these behavioral change steps for me. But now, I can take that model and apply it elsewhere with other things that I want to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about how, how coaching helps you do that.
I think, one of the things that coaching does is really help us build self-awareness, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that the system and the methodology that coaching uses, which we just talked about, right? This idea of understanding and assessing where you are and what you're trying to get to, going through the analysis and gaining some clarity from that exercise and introspection, road mapping and practicing a new behavior and then consolidating that behavioral change. That methodology is incredibly powerful. And it's actually something that any of us can apply to pretty much any problem that we come across or any goal that we're focused on trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. And embedding that in ourselves to be empowered to use that as a problem-solving approach is super powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two sides to this. Number one is that once you start working with a coach, it's not like a forever exercise, right? Yeah. Because you do learn practical skills that you can then take and are replicable to other goals and areas of your life. Now, that's not to say that you won't ever have to, call back in a coach maybe to help you with some of the questions and the increments, but at least you have the process down. And so it could be, you work with a coach for 3 to 6 months, but then maybe you meet with them once a year just to come back in and help you sort of...
It's a health check.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? In the same way you'd go back to the doctor to just check in and make sure that your knee's good still.
Yeah, the annual checkup, right? The annual coaching checkup. And so really the last step, though, is sort of making behavior change like second nature, right? This idea that if you've had the model laid out for you, you've done it once, you understand the process, and you can actually apply it again and again to other things in your life or other goals that you may want to achieve in your life.
Totally. That's, I think, it for today in terms of covering this topic. We look forward to bringing you a lot of additional interesting topics and research and coaching methodologies, as well as conversations with coaches, conversations with researchers and scientists on all topics, coaching, performance, and wellness. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe wherever you listen and leave us a review. Find your ideal coach at www.theideamix.com. Special thanks to our producer, Martin Maluski, and singer-songwriter Doug Allen.